Yeah. They grow up fast.
Yeah. What do you learn? What grade?
I taught 4, and I taught
Yeah. Where did you start? Kindergarten or?
I started in kindergarten. Very difficult to make that jump. And I never really taught that I was certified. It was like, okay,
Here's a spot for you.
yeah. And at that time, I was actually sexually assaulted. Only men. Well, it's up to you. Took money out of my paycheck. But I taught her privately.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to ask that you all take your seats because we're getting started a couple minutes late here. So, all right, we're good. Cool. Hi, I'm Maia Zewert. I'm the editor of the Lincoln County News, and I will be moderating tonight's forum. Before we introduce the candidates and get underway, I would like to recognize the Scouts from Troop 213 of Damariscotta. They are here this evening to earn their Communications Merit Badge. So, I'm also going to ask them to lead us in the pledge, so if everybody can stand and remove their hats. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. More and none more.
That was about as much as I could do without my hats. So, thank you very much, Scouts. I would also like to thank Great All Day for hosting us this evening, as well as all of the candidates for participating. For those of you who don't know, this is our 5th and final forum of the election season, and I'm happy to say we've had 100% participation from the candidates, so I would like to thank them all as well. In a minute, I'm going to ask the candidates to introduce themselves. Everyone will have 2 minutes for introductions, answers, and closing statements. In the interest of moving things along, we ask that the audience hold their applause until all candidates have completed their remarks, and we would also request that the audience refrain from outbursts or remarks directed at the candidates. Politeness. This year, in addition to creating some of our own questions, we solicited suggestions from our readers to see what issues are on the forefront of voters' minds. For those of you who have been to any of the four, these will sound familiar. I will pose a question to the group, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, just repeating so that everybody understands. I will hold up a yellow piece of paper when there's 30 seconds remaining, and I will hold up a red piece of paper when there's 5 seconds to hint, please wrap up your thoughts. So without further ado, we're getting underway. I will start first with the candidates for Senate District 13, which consists of Lincoln County, except for Dresden, as well as Washington and Windsor. Dale Harmon, I will ask you to go first, please.
Are these on already?
It should be.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Dale Harmon. I'm a lifelong Mainer. Lived here virtually my whole life. I've raised 2 children to adulthood. I have a 24-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old son. A few years ago, I married my beautiful wife, Kristen, who's a special ed teacher down in the middle school in Booth Bay region, middle school, and we're now currently raising my stepdaughter, Zoe, who's 8. I guess what brought me into this is years ago, before I was a selectman, and I've been a selectman for the town of Booth Bay for about the last 16 years, and I've been foreman for the water district for the last 25 years, running multi-million-dollar projects. But a senior person, I don't know, a stepdad, a surrogate dad to me years ago when I was getting coffee one day, kind of suggested to me as I was complaining about Booth Bay's politics that you can either be part of the problem or part of the solution. And he said, next month, if you get 25 signatures on a piece of paper, you can actually be running for selectman and maybe have something to say about what's going on in town of Booth Bay. After a few more conversations with this individual, I took my papers out, I got my 25 signatures, and I've been there ever since. What got me was either you're part of the problem or part of the solution, and I want to be part of the solution. I think we're kind of heading the wrong direction. I'm a firm believer that Maine is the way life should be, but I think we're slipping, and I want to get us back to Maine is the way life should be. I hope I can hear your vote. I certainly want to do the work to get to Augusta, but I got to get there first. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Senator Cameron Rennie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Cameron Rennie. I am currently the state senator for this district, most of Lincoln County, towns of Washington and Windsor. I grew up in a working class family in Bristol, and that is where I currently live. I have lived there with my lovely husband, and we have a couple kids. I've got little Georgie just started first grade, and Leon's in pre-K now, and our dog, Molly. I have spent most of my adult life as a school counselor in public schools. It is a job I really love. I really enjoy working with all of the students and families. And one of the things that I do at my job, other than make sure students meet their potential academically, social, emotionally, and career development-wise, I also have served on multiple committees and in leadership positions and district-wide committees in order to serve my school districts. And I really enjoy working with families and helping them, access the resources that they need and the skills that they need in order to be successful. I think the best way to support kids, which is what I'm really about, is to support their families and support strong communities. Because a strong community goes a long ways in making sure all of our kids stand their very best chance at for the next generations. I realized after several years in the schools that I could make more of an impact by working at a policy level, which is why I ran for state senate. And I'm very happy to report that my school counselor skills translated well to Augusta. My communication skills and my work ethic have made me an effective legislator. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Audience, you may notice that we are using the school's microphone, so the candidates are sharing in the name of bipartisanship. Next, we have the candidates for House District 46, which consists of Bristol, Damariscotta, Montpelier, Newcastle, and Noblesboro, Representative Lydia Crafts, and Mary Lou Jackson. We're going to start with Representative Crafts.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you to the Lincoln County News for hosting this, as well as the other 4 forums. And thank you to the audience, because I'm sure you all have a million things you could be doing on a Thursday evening. And I think this audience here and all of us joining together is a real testament to our community's investment in democracy. So for those of you I haven't met before, I'm Lydia Crafts. I live in Newcastle. I grew up in Waldo County, and I'm just finishing my 2nd term in the state house. So coming up on 4 years. I had no political background when I first got involved, and as I'm knocking out, door to door, talking to folks, a lot of people ask, why on earth would you be in politics in 2024? And it's very, very simple to me. I grew up in a small town just up the coast, and the message I heard was, there's not really a future for you here. You're gonna need to leave, right? That's where success and a bright future for you and your peers are. And I didn't believe it. I knew it wasn't really true. And so now as a mom raising two daughters, I want to make sure that every child growing up sees they can raise a family, they can get an education, they can find and afford housing, they can have a bright future right here if this is where they choose to stay home. I will also say that this evening before I left my house, I was getting ready to leave and my daughter started to cry and she said, "Mom, I don't want you to go tonight." And I said, "Why?" I do lots of political events, right? A lot of evenings. And she said, "Because I don't want you to get hurt and dangerous things happen at political events." And I don't want that to be our children's future. We are gonna disagree tonight about a lot of issues, but at the heart of it, we all, each four of us, every one of you, care deeply about the health of our community and a healthy and safe future. And that's what I want for my children, as well as all of yours. And so that's why I continue to serve. It's why I'm running for a third term. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Mary Lou, will you please pose us a question?
Can you repeat the question again? It's just introducing yourself?
Oh, yeah, just telling us about yourself.
Or the why and why and run?
Yeah, that all.
Okay. I want to thank Lincoln County News for holding this forum tonight. And I'm Mary Lou Daxlin, for those of you that don't know who I am. I live in Newcastle, and I live with my husband, Carl with a K, and our Maine Coon cat, Chester. I have a degree in history, and I have taught both elementary and high school. And my business experience is I've been a buyer of housewares and textiles. One of the reasons why I'm running for a state representative is that schools in Maine are declining. Every year we spend more money on the schools, and every year the students' scores in math and reading drop. We now grade 43 out of 50 states, and at one point we were in the top 5. We need to return reading, writing, and math as a #1 priority in the schools. And we need to add into the high schools vocational programs for the trades, which would mean electrical and plumbing, obviously, and we all know how difficult it is to get a plumber when you need a plumber. So we definitely need more plumbers in the state. I also would like to see high schools return to have civics in government, so that our students will know exactly how the government works on the local level, the state level, and on the federal level. And they also should be very proficient in the fact that they know that we are a constitutional republic, we are not a democracy. So we need to really make sure that our students have a good background in reading and math, so they can enter the workplace and the marketplace. Picture if we graduate students and they don't know how to read or write, how are they going to ever get a driver's license or fill out a job application? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Because I forgot some housekeeping, if you need to use the restroom, it is up the ramp to the right. And please silence your phones. Okay, we're back. Now we're going to start off, as we have with the other forms, with a question about the campaign. So, while talking with voters in the lead up to the election, what are some topics or issues that have been most frequently brought up? And if elected, how do you hope to address these issues in the legislature? We are going to start with Senator Cameron Knight.
Thank you. Yeah, great question. I've been knocking a lot of doors, and some of the things that come up the most are generally, I guess what you would call kitchen table issues, right? It's the ability for people to get by, to be able to afford their housing and their heating, to find childcare, let alone afford it. It's all the things that we need to do just to get by and live right here. These are things that are really important and things that I've been working on the past 2 years since I've been elected to office. A couple of the ways I think at the state level that we are able to help keep these costs more reasonable for our friends and neighbors is through addressing the housing shortage, housing costs, as well as healthcare, both insurance and prescription drugs is where I've been putting a lot of my efforts. There are property taxes is a big one that's been coming up a lot at doors lately. A lot of the valuations have been going up. I'm giving myself that as my next research project, is to learn more about how all of these valuations are done. At the state level, we do our best to send money back to the towns through revenue sharing, through supporting our schools at 55%. I always recommend all of us to participate in our local governments, go to our school board meetings, go to our county commissioner meetings, go to our select board meetings, because property taxes really come down to your town budget, your county budget, and your school budget. And we've got to be involved and be good citizens to make sure that we're keeping an eye on how things are being spent so we can all continue to afford to live here. Thank you.
Thank you. And with every question, we're just going to go right down the line, so whoever has to answer first gets to answer last the next time. So, Representative Kraus, you're up.
Great. So 2 minutes to talk about the biggest issues and all their solutions. It's
Yes.
a very easy, an easy task you give us. So I would say the top 2 things I hear are inflation, right? The ability to afford life right now, and housing. Inflation is a really tough thing, right? We see it coming down, not fast enough, and I don't think there's a single one of us in this room who hasn't been touched by the increase in every cost. State government can play a role in that, but it is also, as Senator Rennie said, it has to be a trifold. So things that we have found important and helpful in the last 2 years in state government, helping people afford programs and services that they depend on. For example, the Medicare Savings Program, right? It was slated to be removed. I had heard from constituents around the district who their only ability to afford healthcare, the cost of healthcare, as we know, are astronomical, was made possible because of the Medicare Savings Program. So preserving the programs that help the most vulnerable in our communities continues to be a strong focus. We see that in increasing access to affordable education. Mary Lou mentioned vocational training. The Maine community college system right now is free for students graduating from high school. This means that being able to afford education relieves some of the pressure placed on families. Free school breakfast and lunch, right? It's not a direct solution to inflation, but it is a method for us to support families and older Mainers who are struggling managing to stay in their homes. So I continue to think that funding the programs that work for Mainers that have bipartisan support has to be our focus, as well, frankly, as increasing our housing stock. So 1 in 3 housing units in Lincoln County is seasonal. This percentage is far too high. We rely on tourism, we need them, but we also have to be investing, like the state has, $76 million this past session in increasing our housing stock. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Saxon, you're up next.
Okay, the first thing that I'm really hearing is the property tax issue, and then of course inflation. But what the biggest complaint I'm hearing is that they removed the senior property tax freeze. And that's become a real burden to our seniors, seeing that we have more seniors in Lincoln County than any other county in the state. And then also what I'm looking to replace, if I get elected, the Democrat-controlled legislature removed the senior tax freeze, property tax freeze, and they also removed the schedule increase to homestead exemption. And they also repealed the limited property tax increase, which you would need a vote approval if your property taxes were going to spike. And all of those 3 things need to be put back in place because our seniors are suffering
And at this point, they don't know whether they should sell their house and get out, but where are they gonna go? Because there's no affordable housing. So I believe that we have to take care of our seniors first, because we have so many in this county, and anybody that needs help. But basically, we need to be looking toward the seniors, because it's the major part of our population.
Thank you.
I don't know.
You got 20 seconds to spare at some point. All right, Mr. Herman, please close out the question.
Okay, as all other three members mentioned, it really is the two strongest points. You have inflation that's gone through the roof. When you go to the grocery store and you're paying, $300 for what you used to pay $200 for, to some that might not affect you that bad, but for most people, that could be the difference between choosing heat or food. And I've heard that a lot out of the 1,000 doors that I've knocked on. What we can do about that at the state level, the only thing I can really think of off the top of my head is we gotta help with energy costs. We have mandates within our energy bills right now that are jacking up our energy costs. If you can lower energy costs at the grocery store level or manufacturing level, that's trickle down to everybody and ultimately would end up at the end user, the taxpayer, and give them a little bit of relief. The fact of the matter is, affordable housing doesn't exist in Maine right now. As I said, I raised 2 kids to adulthood. I have a 24-year-old daughter that if it wasn't for employee housing, she wouldn't be out of the house right now. And I have a 21-year-old son that currently lives in my basement. He'll get out sometime, and he's in no hurry to get out. I can't. I'm not going to push my son out to a place that has no place for him. But when a one-bedroom apartment costs you $1,600 with nothing included, we're going the wrong way. Something's broken at the state level, the county level, town level, federal level, and we need to do things to fix that. How we can go about that? I think we need to stop pushing everybody to college and get people into trades. I think if you have a whole pile of people out there building houses, the cost of houses come down. If you have a whole pile of plumbers that are ready to plumb those houses, the cost of plumbing comes down. We've been pushing people to college for years and years and years. I think it's time to reopen up the trades. Thank you very much.
The good news is you now all have 2 minutes to expand on how you deal with rising costs. So, the official question is, between inflation and increased property taxes, neighbors' dollars are being stretched thinner and thinner, as you have all heard. What can the legislature do to help alleviate this? And we are going to start this question with Representative Kraus.
Thank you. It's a great question, and I'm glad for 2 more minutes to talk a little bit more. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So Mary Lou mentioned removing and replacing the property tax stabilization program. It was a great idea, right? It came to us, it had bipartisan support 2 years ago, and unfortunately it missed a key component because the property tax freeze had no income requirements. And when legislators are given the task and the responsibility of spending taxpayer dollars, it means a lot to decide how we put those dollars out into our communities. And I don't know how other people feel about this, but high income earners, I don't believe should be the target of property tax relief, right? Property tax is our county jails, it's our town roads, it's our school budgets. The money has to come from somewhere. So in year 2, the property tax stabilization program ballooned to $31 million. Now, instead of funding that, it was repealed and replaced by a Republican senator, Senator Bennett, and in its place, this is what the state did. We added $84 million to the property tax fairness credit, which meant that more low and middle income earners could have an expanded property tax credit. It means that we expanded the benefit for disabled veterans. We increased the homestead exemption spending by $40.5 million, right? The homestead exemption program is a very simple, straightforward way to keep money in Mainers' pockets. We also started the state property tax deferral for those who were at risk of losing their homes, $1.5 million to help people stay in their homes, because we know it's far more costly to try to house someone who's lost their home than to try to keep them in it where they are. So I think that will continue to be challenges, but we have programs in place that need to be funded and continued. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. I will always repeat the question if any of you like it at any point. Okay. So between inflation and increased property taxes, Maynard's dollars are being stretched thinner and thinner. What can the legislature do to help alleviate this stress?
Okay, the legislature can look at, we know what the issue is with the property taxes, or they need to look at, like Dale mentioned, our energy costs are way too high. We need to be looking at hydro, because Canada right now has the cheapest electric rates in North America. We need to understand that wind and solar are not going to get us the amount of electricity that we need. And unfortunately, we're spending sending subsidies back to the solar people that most of them are out of state. Wind, what happened back this past summer in southern New England with that wind turbine offshore losing a blade and closing beaches, and it was a health hazard, and it was harming the wildlife, is not the answer. They're now seeing in southern New England that the lobsters are disappearing and the scallop beds are dying off. And we have to protect our fishermen at all costs. So we really should not be talking about wind anymore. We should call for a moratorium, which they are doing in southern New England. And I think if we can get more people looking and talking about hydro and getting us into that avenue of getting electricity, it's going to lower the cost of electricity substantially.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon, you get to close out the question.
Could I have it asked one more time?
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's the last forum, folks. It's going downhill. All right. To repeat the question. Between inflation and increased property taxes, Maynard's dollars are being stretched thinner and thinner. What can the legislature do to help alleviate this stress?
So, I'm going to start with energy costs. I think energy costs is kind of the low-hanging fruit here. If we can help reduce energy costs at the state level, and I do mean stop mandating requirements that we have to do wind and solar. I don't know why we're supplementing multi-million-dollar corporations. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And I agree with Mary Lou as far as wind, and for that matter, solar. If you're cutting down multiple forest areas to put in solar panels, I think you're going the wrong way when it comes to green energy. But neither here nor there. So we started energy costs and get them as low as possible, stop mandating electric and solar and wind, and let kind of get government out of the way. Let the free market reign a little bit. Competition is a good thing. And that can help trickle things down. It's a line, and it's the elephant in the room. We all know that we got an uphill battle on our hand. We've all been fighting it for many years now, but we can't have excessive spending and expect that things are going to come down. But $4 billion more in the last 6 years than we had prior. And that's driving inflation, and that's driving the cost of everything. So we have to start somewhere. I think energy costs is the easiest place for the state level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, one more. Sorry, that was my bad. Very sorry. Senator Rennie, will you please close out the question?
Yes, thank you. We're on a real energy kick here. I'll go with that. So energy costs are one of the, I'm assuming we'll probably talk more about housing and healthcare at some point. So energy costs is certainly one of the things that is stretching our budgets and we need to worry about. I am of the mind that CMP is our only option. And because of that, we need to be holding them accountable. And quite frankly, I think the PUC, we need to hold them accountable as well, because they could be putting in more protections, I think, for the average consumer than they necessarily do. I'd also like to take a look at vegetation management. I spent quite a while in a meeting a few months ago with CMP about how we are preventing all of the down wires during the storms. And I'm sure all of you have experienced multiple power outages over the past year. And there are some tweaks, I think, that need to be made, and maybe people that aren't willing to bring down trees that we know are definitely going to be falling onto these wires and raising our rates, because that's what raises our rates truly. We need to be looking at how to pay for that without the rates going through the roof in the middle of January, quite frankly. I want Maine to be as energy independent as possible. And so I don't think we should be throwing away renewable energy as an option. We need to be diversifying. We need as many options for energy as we can get, so we can use the cheapest when it is the cheapest and supplement when we need to supplement, while still moving away from greenhouse gases. I'm gonna stop.
You had like 5 seconds left.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you. We're not quite sure what's happening in the hallway, but
Yeah,
every now and then it's
Yeah, there's a
concerning.
pop.
Oh, yeah, it's like, okay. Alrighty, so our next question is for Mary Lou Daxman to start, and then we'll go down the table. And I promise, Lydia, you will close out the question. Okay. Education is a topic on a lot of people's minds. What changes, if any, would you want to see the legislature take in regard to the public education system?
Okay, I think I covered this in my opening statement, but I will go over it one more time. Because the testing scores are so bad, we really need to put emphasis on reading, writing, and math. If our students can't read, like I said, by the time they get out of high school, how are they going to work into the workforce, and how are they going to get a driver's license if they can't read? And that's the crust of it. We really need to put priority on reading, writing, and math, especially in the primary grades. And again, Dale said the same thing. I believe Lydia said the same thing. We do have some after high school vocational programs, but we still need to put them in the high school, because back in the day, there always was shop in the high school. And we need to add that into the high school curriculum. And again, civics and government, maybe because I have a degree in history, but most students that get out of high school today have no clue how the government runs. And they don't understand it, and we really need to make sure they understand it. And hopefully we will recruit more people to run for select seats, run for the state legislature, and run federally. So that's important. And also, when you have a good government course, you are being taught the Constitution. You have to read it, you have to compare it with the Articles of Confederation. There's a lot of things that you learn by reading the Constitution. And that's why we have to make sure that our students know when they graduate that we are a constitutional republic and we are not a democracy. I got 30 minutes,
15 seconds.
That's okay.
Okay.
I'll pass it on down to Dale.
Slowly, we'll just keep banking it down the line, and whoever has the last closing statement can have like the last 10 minutes.
Are we good?
Yeah, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you good?
I think I'm all right.
All right.
So education. So for one, I'm going to say this kind of tongue in cheek a little bit. I live with a teacher, so education is always an interesting conversation in our house. She's a very smart and intelligent woman, and I love her and appreciate her dearly. Fortunately, I'm not really going to stand on her side of things so much as far as we're not talking about elementary school education. Yes, I agree with Lydia, Mary Lou, extremely so that I think we need to have civics, social studies, history. We really need to get back to the basics of education, math, reading, writing. We're losing our standards in this state. Like we said earlier, we were within the top 5, I think, in education, and now we're like 36 or something to that effect. That's not going the right direction as far as I'm concerned. But beyond that, my push for education would be further education or high school education and getting shop classes back in shops. Mechanic, auto mechanic. Yes, we have vocational little schools like around here. Everybody goes to math, and that's great. You put all your eggs in one basket, but there's no reason why we can't have boat building. There's no reason why we can't have welding. There's no reason why we can't have apprenticeship programs for builders or plumbers. I would like to see all of that stuff expanded. I think we need to think out of the box and get our workforce back in Maine, because if you notice, there's a help wanted sign on every door around here, and nobody willing to fill those jobs. So that's my kind of take on education. There's so much. This is so much of a bigger issue. We all know this. But I definitely think that we need to get back to the vocational and really push tradesmen.
Thank you. Senator Runny.
Thank you. Education is certainly near and dear to my heart as a public educator, and as a public educator who was working during the shutdown, the COVID shutdowns. No matter how you feel about how COVID shutdowns were handled, the fact of the matter is our schools were shut down for quite a while. And those of you who may have worked in public education before, or just, have a special student in your life, probably know how big of an impact that can truly make. Did you know that students who are chronically absent, and that's only 10% of the school year, so that's 2 days a month, mind you, a chronically absent 2 day a month student in kindergarten, that can affect their reading scores all the way up through 3rd grade. Our students were out of school for months, and one of the things about Maine that is amazing is our natural beauty and our remoteness. And one of the challenges during that time was the fact that our students, many of them, did not have proper internet access to even be able to access the limited amount of education we were able and trying to provide. It was devastating for students, for teachers, for all of us. We are going to come back from this, but it takes time. It takes time and it takes work. Our schools are very dedicated to reading, to writing, to science, to math. And we need interventionists, we need ed techs, we need workers, we need dedicated individuals, and we need support. We need support from our communities and from the state. We need to be looking at our EPS formula, that's Essential Programs and Services. I won't go into a tangent because I think I have 5 seconds left. But please be involved with your local schools. Join the school board, see how you can volunteer, see how you can fundraise, because that is how we are going to make progress for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Representative Grass.
Thank you. So as a social worker in my sort of outside of the legislature work, I have worked in special education for many years prior to entering the legislature. And first I would say I'm extremely proud of the work that happens in local schools. My stepdaughter Amelia graduated from Lincoln Academy last year and had an amazing education and is pursuing higher education at Southern Maine Community College. And so I know firsthand as a parent the quality of education that I see students receiving in our county. Funding is a terrific challenge. Many of you probably have heard, we reached our legal mandate to fund 55% of education, but as Cameron just mentioned, the EPS formula and minimum receiver districts don't access the same benefits because the way we fund education is inherently unequal, right? It's based on our property valuations, and that means that across our state, you have a huge discrepancy in education. So for the state's responsibility to fill in the gaps, it means that we need schools that are able to serve kids however they're walking in the door, right? There's a reason we serve free breakfast. It's because a child cannot learn if they're hungry, right? As a society, we seem to have gotten on board there. The vocational programming between Bath and Rockland, the Midcoast School of Technology, we have led across the state with beautiful examples of what apprenticeships and direct training can do for young people. And then finally, I would just say, one of the best things we can do for high quality schools is invest in our support staff and our teachers, because we've seen paraprofessionals, ed techs, be underpaid for years and years, and those are the folks providing interventions, providing the direct instruction in special education, helping and providing the intervention that students need to make up the gains they've lost from the COVID shutdown.
Thank you. All right, I may have to repeat this question for each of you, it's very long, I'm so sorry. We're starting with you, Mr. Hartman. Emergency services in the state have been hit with challenges over the past few years, with potentially more on the horizon. Equipment, vehicle, and personnel costs have also increased, and rural departments are struggling to find volunteers, as well as proposed OSHA rule coming down. What is your view on the state of emergency services in Maine, and what role do you envision the legislature taking to address some of these matters?
All right, so this is just a very loaded and tough question to answer. I'm going to do the best I can with it. One, I think that the volunteer services that we have throughout the state are magnificent, and they have pulled it for years and years and years without any help from the federal government, and the federal government's about to try to trash them as far as I'm concerned. And I hope at a state level we will fight that tooth and nail, because what it's going to destroy. I don't even know how some small systems are going to be able to survive at all. They're going to literally close up shop. So now we go from having a small volunteer fire department to no fire department whatsoever. Again, wrong directions. Personally, I call it field politics. It's great. You can throw all these safety mandates out, and it might work for New York City, it might work for Chicago, but it doesn't work for Benton. It doesn't work for Fort Kent, and it's not going to work for the other 1,500 small towns around here. It's ridiculous. What can we do about it? Hopefully fight. Hopefully sink our teeth in and dig our heels in and fight back. As far as volunteers, we are not a volunteer society anymore. Again, all the more reason to preach civics and to teach civics, to get your kids, your students. My two oldest, we used to do rebuilding together every May to teach them volunteering is a good thing. Get involved with your community. You need to be involved, especially with these little volunteer fire departments and ambulance services. But I think we've done a wonderful job over the years, and I hope we can continue to do so, and I hope the federal government doesn't destroy that house. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Rennie, you're up next. You're going to ask me to repeat it.
No, emergency services.
Yes.
OSHA rules.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is a big one. Been working on this for a minute. So I'm assuming most people in here, OSHA, your work safety has put out some new standards on the federal level that would absolutely devastate a lot of our fire departments specifically, but also all of our EMS services across the state. I want to say it's 80+% of the fire departments in Maine are volunteer-based, volunteer-run fire departments. These standards, while yes, good-natured, and while we do need to be doing more to protect our firefighters, specifically their health when working with hazardous chemicals, lots of the other requirements that are coming down to these standards are, I guess the easiest way to put it is they would put us out of commission. I don't think we'd have these services if these standards end up coming down. And I don't know about you, but if my house catches on fire and I call 911, I sure hope somebody comes up to help me. And I sure hope somebody comes to help you too. One of the standards, I think I mentioned this in the last one, has to do with equipment has to be less than 10 years old. And there's a lot of our fire departments where we can't even buy the fire truck until it's over 10 or 15 years old, because that's when we can afford it. It still works fine, perfectly safe. But we need to make sure that if we're having regulations and safety protocols, they need to be reasonable and manageable. Advocacy really can work. These rules are not set in stone yet. On the state level, we have already been advocating for changes. They're going through rulemaking currently. They are accepting comment through November. Maine has actually been one of the states with the highest amount of participation in this. So please participate, go talk to your local EMTs and firefighters, get them to comment, because advocacy, we don't control it, but advocacy can make a big difference.
Thank you. Representative Grass.
Thank you. I don't think you'd find a legislator in the State House in Augusta who doesn't understand the critical nature of our volunteer fire departments. I think the fire at Schooner Landing last month was a perfect example that the reliance on both our local fire departments and mutual aid is critical to keeping vibrant communities in rural Maine. There are a couple of projects I'm excited about. One is at the county level, using American Rescue funds to pilot housing development on municipal land, specifically for EMS workers. Because what we find is when we have volunteer departments and folks are strapped for just to pay their basic costs, making time for volunteering gets progressively more difficult. And so providing affordable housing for our first responders is a great opportunity to invest locally on land that we have to bring in folks to promote volunteering. I will say earlier this summer we celebrated Jimmy Hall and his service to the Damariscotta Fire Department. And when you look at the Damariscotta Fire Department, it's shockingly young. And that gives me hope because it tells me that young people are interested in investing and giving back into their communities. We have to make it worth it for them. And so one of the things that the legislature has done in the last 4 years is for the first time in history, we funded the LOSAP program. This is the Length of Service Award Program, which invests in a retirement account for volunteer firefighters. So when they reach a retirement age, the state has contributed, as well as the municipality, to provide some financial benefit for the years of volunteering. There are creative solutions at the town level, at the county level, and yes, at the state level. I think we all understand the vital nature of our volunteers, and we have to keep working for their benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Daxland, please close out the question.
Okay, basically, seeing that OSHA is putting all these regulations over us, and I agree with Cameron, we need to have advocacy in it, and we need people to speak out. And I also believe it's a good thing that maybe Governor Mills will link with other governors, that I'm sure there are other states that have volunteer fire departments that are small, that are gonna go under with all these regulations. And we should get as many states as we can to push back on OSHA, because OSHA, in many cases, is government overreach, and it definitely is going to be hurting us here in Maine, because volunteer fire departments are people that really care about their community. They put their life on the line if there's a fire, and they want to help. And we need to keep that going. And for the regulations that OSHA is putting forward is just not good for Maine. And I'm glad to hear that the legislature is already in the works of trying to do something, because you need to do something. So anyways, I think you all need to understand this is the time you need to get involved, because if we don't have a fire department or rescue squads in a community, we are gonna lose citizens. Somebody's gonna die. And then it'll be too sad, and it'll be like, okay, now we gotta do something. Well, we gotta do that before somebody dies, because we don't have a fire department in a community.
Thank you. Thank you all. All right, so the next question is for our incumbents. Senator Rennie and Representative Grass, what achievement from your most recent term are you most proud of, and why? We will start with Senator Rennie.
This feels familiar. All right, I'm gonna go with one that I accomplished in my first year. That was a barrier for me as a school counselor for so long. So as a public school counselor, I've worked with a large number of students or students' families who somebody in the family, the kid or a parent typically has some sort of mental health event that lands them in emergency services. Your emergency department, your urgent care, and a doctor determines that they need behavioral health support. Counseling generally is a recommended method. And when they go to, sign up for some counseling or locate a counselor and make an appointment, and they're told that their insurance will not pay for it because it did not go through their primary care physician. And I know, for some of us, we're like, just make an appointment with your primary care physician. But for a lot of people and a lot of families, that is a huge hurdle to get over in order to access these services that they clearly need, especially if they're going to thrive and return to school or return to work or just function in a healthy way. So my first year there, I sponsored a piece of legislation that requires insurance companies to cover those services, as well as physical therapy services. The doctors were really on board with those also being included. Insurance companies now have to cover those services when the referral comes from an emergency department doctor or urgent care services as well. And the primary care physician is still notified so as to keep that holistic healthcare in place. It was a problem for like 10 years as a school counselor, and I fixed it in the first year. It was great.
Thank you. Representative Grass, you're up next.
Great. In my service this past term, I was lucky enough and privileged to chair the transportation committee. I'm a social worker. Most people ask me, how on earth did you end up in transportation? And I say, it's the number one concern I hear from folks. It's the number one constituent service I provide is there's a crushed culvert, there's a dangerous road, the road's washed out. And so I spend a lot of time on the phone with the liaison from the Department of Transportation. But here's the problem with the way we fund our roads and bridges and public transit. We rely on bonding because for a very long time, we have not allocated enough long-term investment of funding into our infrastructure. And so each budget cycle comes around and the Maine people, by an overwhelming majority, over 70% of Mainers, support transportation bonding. But 2 years ago, we were looking at a budget of $11 billion. And I said, hold on a second. If we have $11 billion to spend as a state, the number one thing that my constituents have been very vocal about is making sure that we have safe and efficient roads to travel so we can get to work, that we can pick up our kids from childcare, we can get where we're going. And so with bipartisan support on the Transportation Committee, we invested $100 million annually. We transferred it from the general fund directly to the highway fund because our gas tax system is no longer supporting enough revenue to fund our roads and bridges. And because of that, the Department of Transportation is able to make long-term investments, meaning not just patching small projects. They can have a long-range strategic plan for how to move Maine forward. We have over 8,000 miles of state roads, and as you can imagine, the budget, and anyone who's traveled the Bristol Road this past summer knows high-quality, safe, efficient roads are really important, and passing that bipartisan highway fund budget, allocating $100 million annually, was one of my biggest successes. Thanks.
Thank you. We're all getting about 5 seconds. All right, our next question is for Ms. Jackson and Mr. Harmon. Similarly, if elected, what would be your number one priority during your first term? And we will start with Ms. Jackson.
I would say it's going to be energy. I think we really need to reduce the electric bills for Mainers. And I think the best way to go about it is to be looking into hydro and to nuclear, because we're just not going to get enough electricity from solar panels. And the solar panels, when they die out, we are going to have to dispose of them. And they have a lot of hazardous metal in them.
toxic metal in them, and where do we have to dispose them? Right now, the only disposal done for solar panels is in Ohio, so we're gonna have to ship them out there. So I really think we should continue looking into hydro and into nuclear. Wind, I've already said, I'm not a happy fan of wind, because especially if we start putting wind turbines offshore, it is going to affect our fishing industry. Seeing what's going on in southern New England, I really think we should just take wind completely off the table, and again, be looking at hydro and nuclear, because that is the number one complaint along with property taxes that I've heard from Mainers in the district, that, you know, we can't afford electricity anymore. So do we pay our electric bill, or do we need? So I think we need to really, that would be something that I would like to push forward if I get elected.
Thank you. Then you can give you a yellow card, you're good. All right, Mr. Harmon, please close it out.
It's gonna sound like I'm kind of riding in on our coattails, but I think energy costs is probably one of my biggest priorities as well. And on similar, but not exactly the same, I guess. I do agree with her as far as wind energy, offshore wind turbines. For lack of better words, if you have a fishing grounds like we have fishing grounds, and you have 200 wind turbines out there with cables running across the bottom, moorings, at least 3 or 4, several thousand-pound moorings, chains, cables, all laying on the floor, it's going to affect our fishing grounds. There's no getting around that. In fact, I don't care what anybody wants to tell me, it's common sense. So I'm not a huge advocate of trying to float a bunch of wind turbines out. And again, if they break or erupt or whatever, then we have all these chemicals and metals and fluids going into the ocean. So again, it goes back to the whole concept of what exactly is green energy if you're contaminating the oceans in the process of being green. And then when it comes to solar, I would much rather see us stop cutting down forests and putting in solar arrays. Why don't we put them over all the parking lots at Walmarts? And you wouldn't have a problem with me at that point in time. I'd actually be advocating it, because then I get out in a dry car and it's shaded in the summertime and it's dry in the wintertime. And I don't have to scrape all the snow off my car. And we have how many parking lots in the state? So why don't we do this? That's what I advocate for. Sarcasm aside, I think energy costs are huge and we need to be able to reduce it. I'm not saying that solar is entirely useless. It is, I think it's being mismanaged. I think it's being put in the wrong spots, to be honest with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you all. All right, our next question. Housing in Maine has been an ongoing topic of conversation and media coverage. Is there one particular facet of the housing situation you are most passionate about, and how would you hope to address it? And we're starting with Representative Kraus.
Thank you. I think, the number one issue is our housing stock, and increasing our housing development is going to take buy-in at the state level. We passed LD 2003 3 years ago, which was really to look at helping towns implement changes to increase density, right, where our services are, that we're not ruining our agricultural land with inefficient or inaccessible development, that we're putting homes and units where there are already essential services and towns can support them with sewer and the roads are prepared. We've invested $22 million in the state in 2 separate programs, the Rural Affordable Rental Housing Program, because we also realize that it's not all homeownership. Not at some stages in our life, being able to rent is really important, and making sure that we're investing in affordable rental units is critical for workforce development. And as well as the $11 million, which leveraged an additional $11 million in federal funds for the low-income housing tax credits. Because again, as I said when I spoke about property taxes, making sure that our taxpayer dollars are going to support some of the most vulnerable Mainers. Mary Lou mentioned older Mainers. Helping them be able to stay in their homes is critical, as well as preserving mobile home parks, because we know they're one of the most affordable ways for people to access housing, and supporting cooperatives like Hempwood Villas we have in Bristol, Maine Housing is putting together a program to support other mobile home parks so that current renters have the option of buying those parks, so out-of-state developers aren't coming in and increasing lot prices. So I think that it's a complicated issue, but I think that combined between the town, the counties, and the state, we can address it.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson,
Just one more time, just make sure I have it right.
absolutely. Housing in Maine has been an ongoing topic of conversation and media coverage. Is there a particular facet of the situation you are most passionate about, and how do you hope to address it?
Okay, as far as housing goes, we know we're in a crisis with affordable housing. I believe that, and I'm glad to hear that there's been some legislation that the towns have more say into how they want affordable housing to go. Affordable housing is a very important thing because we can't even, keep our seniors when they decide to downsize and say, I don't want a large house anymore, and they want affordable housing. We need that for them. We also need to see that we need affordable housing for people that are going to come into the state and work. And I know we've lost a lot of medical staff, but we can't recruit people from other states because we don't have any affordable housing. So I would like to see that we let the towns decide also who gets that affordable housing. Everybody knows in their community who needs affordable housing. So what shouldn't happen is somebody from Brunswick is going to be pulled up to Damariscotta for senior housing or for affordable housing. It should be whoever's in that community and whoever really needs it. And it should be for our veterans as well. There's just too many veterans that are homeless, and we're building campers for them. And yet the legislature passed $100 million last year for affordable housing. And I still don't get an answer as to why we're still building campers for our veterans. So affordable housing is a problem, and it's going to be a bigger crisis if we continue to bring in illegal people into the state.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon, you're up next.
Affordable housing, what am I passionate about, how I like to fix it? Well, there's a lot in that statement, I guess. I'd love to fix it. It's been created by a monster, inflation, and the housing market the way it is, the boom. I think short-term rentals have destroyed a lot of the inventory as well. But regardless, here we are, fixing it. I think code, land use ordinances in small towns need to be loosened. Regulations need to be lessened so we can allow things like trailer parks, multi-use. I know a lot of towns, at least locally around here, are not big on apartment complexes or multi-units. I think those need to be encouraged. I think rentals need to be encouraged. I'd like to think that we incentivize through tax cuts for some developers to come in to actually build some affordable housing. I think that's maybe one way to address it. If you can give them some incentivization through a tax break, that they come into small communities and build small affordable housing, multi-unit rentals would be amazing as far as I'm concerned, or even for that matter at this point in time, even supporting trailer parks for first-time home buyers, for elderly on fixed income. Everybody's going to need it. It's such a it's a wave of catastrophe in front of us, and I don't know how else to fix it. The one thing I will say, back to education, I really think we need to push for tradesmen again. I still think that if you have a lot of contractors out there building, the cost will come down. I think if you have a lot of plumbers in there, the cost will come down. So I still think we can help through education, but we need to lessen the permitting costs. We need to lessen the regulations. We got to get the government out of the way and let people do it.
Thank you. And finally, Senator Rennie, please close out the question.
Thank you. 2 minutes does not feel like enough for such a huge topic, but housing, we all know it's a big problem. We should have been building more housing 10 years ago, and we weren't. We have a supply and demand issue for sure, because people want to live here. It's a beautiful place. Things that I'm passionate about with housing, I put in a bill to fund that rural affordable rental housing program specifically, because what it does is it incentivizes the building of housing in rural areas, which looks different than it does in your Portland, your Lewiston, your Bangor, right? It encourages and gives financial incentives for developers to create housing that is between 5 to 18 units, not your giant, massive cinder block, things that will fit in with our communities and provide a little relief in housing to people who need affordable housing. And affordable housing has a definition. It can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. But affordable means costing no more than 30% of your income. That's what affordable housing is. Another big piece is keeping people in their homes. It's not only the right thing to do, it is the fiscally responsible thing to do. I'll give you an example. My colleague, Coach, we call him Coach, Senator Rafferty. He put in a bill to give money to the McKinney-Vento program. I'm not sure if you know what that is. It supports homeless students. So when students become homeless, the McKinney-Vento program makes sure that they can be bused into their previous schools, and they help find emergency housing for the families. It is much cheaper and has proven to be much cheaper and better to help those families out before they end up homeless, maybe with a rental payment, and keep them in their homes and keep those students going to school. Oh my goodness, I want to talk about all the home parks and I'm out of time.
So you have closing statements.
Okay.
Please give them a round of applause. All right, with the next question, we will be starting with Mr. Harmon. What is the biggest challenge you see in Maine's healthcare industry, and what would you want to see the legislature do to address it? Sorry, all the gum. Please.
As I tried to educate myself a little bit on healthcare, last forum, I was kind of caught off guard by that question, to be honest with you. Not because I don't realize or recognize that it's a problem in the state. We're a rural community, which onto itself is a challenge. We don't have hospitals in all our rural areas. Most people have to travel a pretty good distance to get to a good hospital. There's a lot of urgent care we've all seen popping up over the past 5-10 years. That's great, but that's not an actual hospital. That's different. So if you need real treatment, cancer treatments or dialysis or any of that thing, there's travel that's involved in that is very difficult for a lot of majors, rural majors to get to. I think we almost, again, we have to look at centers of areas where there's population that can all travel, and maybe make that 2.5-hour or 3-hour drive down to an hour for some people, or maybe make mobile units that can do dialysis and that then can travel from place to place. I know they've done it in other countries, other states. I can't imagine we couldn't do it here. Again, we're rural, we have to think out of the box, and we need to figure out how to help out the citizens. There's 1.37 of us in this humongous state. And there's a lot of us down here on the coast and on the southern part, but there's a whole heck of a lot of us up north too that don't have quite the access that we do. And again, bringing prices down and costs down in competition, I think is wonderful. Controlling and letting the market shine and letting things drive prices down. Sometimes I say it again, get the government out of the way and let it do the thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Rennie.
Healthcare. Healthcare is so important. Without your health, what do you have? This is one of my bigger, what I put a lot of focus and effort behind. I already gave you the one example of cutting a little bit of insurance red tape in order for people to be able to access services, but I think there's a lot more we could be doing at the state level. For example, Maine, we are desperate for providers of all types, really, but dentists specifically, psychiatrists specifically. We've been doing a lot of work over the past couple years in trying to make it easier for people who have these skills and have this education and training to be able to come here and get right to work and start alleviating some of that pressure. We passed a number of bills having to do with that over the past couple of years in the Health Coverage Insurance and Financial Services Committee that I serve on. On top of needing more providers, prescription drugs are a big issue. I want to say it's something like 1 in 4 Mainers has either skipped a dose, cut pills in half, or neglected to refill a prescription due to the costs, and because we're just trying to get by. I put in a bill that came so close and I want to see it through, and what it does is it ties the price of prescription drugs to the prices negotiated by Medicare. So not only will Medicare patients be able to benefit from these negotiations, but the rest of us in the commercial market would also be able to benefit from these price negotiations as well. Prescription drugs are one of those things that you have to have. If you need it, you have to have it to be able to live a full and healthy life. And so I think we need to be putting a lot more effort behind it and regulating where we need to regulate. Thank you.
Representative Kraus.
I just want to echo or build off of something that Dale said, because sometimes we get questions like this, like, what would you do to fix healthcare? And one of my answers is like, I don't know. I don't sit up here as the expert on all policymaking in the state of Maine. We have 151 House members, and luckily we have people with expertise who sit on health insurance committees and want to go head to head with health insurance companies, which we know are highly problematic. So having said that, I do have some specific policy areas that I care deeply about. One is behavioral health care as a social worker, increasing our workforce in the state, which means reducing barriers because licensing happens at the state level, which means if you're licensed to be a counselor in New Hampshire, you cannot provide mental health services in Maine unless you also have a Maine license. So I passed the Social Worker Compact, which basically says states that sign on, those providers can provide telehealth services across state lines, because we know in a rural state like Maine, having access to providers who might live in a saturated market in New York to be able to provide telehealth services remotely is really valuable to people who are in crisis. The other piece of policy work that perhaps I'll be able to speak more to, but it's the public health response to the opioid epidemic. We lost 723 Mainers last year, and with 30 seconds left, I can't really dive in, but I will say that we're one of the first states to see a decline in overdose fatalities since the spike. We reduced our overdose deaths by 16%, and it wasn't me, and it wasn't just a handful of legislators. It was our entire state coming together to say that we have to do something different, and I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to talk more about that.
Thank you. Ms. Daslin, please close the question.
Okay, as far as some things that Dale has said and Lydia said, we really need to work on rural transportation for people to get to the hospital, especially if they need dialysis. And that is a problem. It's a problem. How we fix it, I don't know, but we are also lacking in a lot of doctors and dentists and psychologists, and the reason we've created a problem of not having enough staffing is that we mandated the COVID vaccine, and a lot of these people are gone and they're not coming back. And how we get people into coming to the state, then we've got the regulations like Lydia just spoke about, that we need to be able to get people in from another state and get them licensed quickly so they can go right ahead and work. But then there's the other side of it, that the ugly elephant in the room is we don't have affordable housing to bring in, say, a group of nurses that just graduated from a nursing school in another part of the country. We have no place to put them. So we need to work on all fronts, on all different things, but we definitely need to make sure that our Mainers are able to get to medical facilities when they need them. And we need to try to get staffing. And I think one way we can start an interest in the high schools is part of that trade program, have classes for people or students rather that want to go into the nursing profession because we desperately need people to grow up here in Maine, stay in here in Maine, and work as a nurse or in the medical field. I guess I'm close to the end here. She gave me the 30-second boom.
You did good. Please give them all a round of applause. All right, so we have time for one more question before I turn it over for closing statements. We have been buzzing through. Thank you all. All right, so it's here to start.
Okay.
All right. So in a time of increasing divide between parties at the national level and rising divisive rhetoric, what can state legislators, do to work across the political spectrum for the betterment of all Maine residents? Yeah.
That's a big one, huh? I think I have a couple things to say about this. First, let's start with the hopeful. Despite what we all kind of see on TV and what some papers may write about, not the Lincoln County News, of course, legislators in Augusta, we get along. We work together. Look, I see you nodding your head. You know what? We do work together to solve problems. We are all there because we care about our state and our communities. And I've worked on many bipartisan bills, and I hope to continue to work on many more. If you don't see the same level of that national kind of fear and anger when you're actually in Augusta. That being said, I think it is all of our responsibility as legislators and as candidates to do what we can to lower the temperature a little bit. For example, all of fairly recently in one of my towns, every single Democratic sign only was sawed in half. Every single one. Why? I mean, it's things like those mailers that I'm sure we're all getting that I'm not sending. I don't think you're sending them either. So check at the bottom, see who sent it, because I doubt it's any of us that are at this table right here. We need to do our best to help keep people on the level and focus on the issues that really matter to us here in Lincoln County. And I hope all of you do your part to try and wade through all of the sort of hateful fear-mongering that will be coming towards all of us on either side over the next month. We can do it.
Thank you. Representative Kraus, you're up.
Yes. You know, when people ask, why would you get into politics now? I feel privileged to say that state politics in Maine it's different, right? It is very different, partly because it's the citizens' legislature, which means most of us have other jobs or other things we return home to. We are not career politicians. We may disagree on how we reach the goals, but most of us have very similar goals for what we want to see the state of Maine look like. We spent some long days and long nights in the State House. It's shocking to me when I look at the Portland Press Herald some mornings or the Bangor Daily News, and I see what's covered, what are the pieces that have been determined to be the highlights of the day before. And it's shocking because it's not shocking, it's inflammatory, right? But it is not the foundation of the work that we do. The work that we do in committees, behind the scenes, working together collaboratively in a bipartisan manner, get far more done than anything you might see on the House floor, the debates, the headlines in the newspaper. And I really believe that a citizens' legislature offers us the opportunity, with term limits, of sending regular Mainers to the State House. We may not all be on the same side of the aisle, but we're all showing up because it's public service, right? We're committed to the good of our communities. And I think that the Maine legislature is a very good example of politics that are done differently. And it's because of clean elections And we have a need to remove corporate spending from politics. You'll see at the ballot, the referendum this year, to limit corporate spending in politics because it does a disservice to all Mainers. And so I think that the more individual, voice-to-voice, face-to-face politicking we do, the better understanding we have of our neighbors and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson?
Okay, we know the rhetoric is really bad right now, and I know signs, Republican signs have all been marked up or stolen or taken away and put to the dump, as well as your reporting Democrat signs are. And we really need to stop the childish behavior, because the signs cost money, and we need to back off on that. I'm glad to hear that the legislature works well together in committee. That's encouraging. It really is, because when you're on the outside looking in, it looks like a totally different story. So basically, I feel that we need to work together, and if I do get elected, I will work with the Democrats. I'm not gonna not talk to them, although that seems to be what everybody thinks is gonna go on at the legislature, but we're not gonna get anything done if we don't talk with each other, if we don't try to fix the problems. And we have a lot of problems to fix. And we really need to work together, one way or the other. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, please close out the question, and then we'll go to closing statements.
So I don't have the advantage of being up there and seeing what it's like. I hope it's all that they kind of say it is, and I believe it is. There's no reason for me not to. I'm first time campaigner. I've knocked on a lot of doors. It's funny what you hear indoors, the opposite of you can tell where they're getting their news and their information, and it doesn't matter which side, right or left. I'm not trying to be favoritism here at all. But it's the civil discourse that I think we're missing, and it's really unfortunate to me. I would always approach any door, no matter whose door it is, courteously, respectfully, kindly. I would never say anything negative to somebody standing in the doorway. And I have been utterly eviscerated standing on somebody's door before, just as an announcement that I was going to run for state senator for the Republican Party. So it is hostile at times. I'm a moderate Republican. I'm a firm believer that we need to get everybody back to the aisle. The only way anything gets done is if you're back to the aisle. We might not get the whole, the great big chunk of the apple the first time. I mean, we'll get a small bite one year, a couple of small bites the following year, or the following session. I'm fine with that. We're not gonna, we're not gonna put a run in a day. It's gonna take time to get things back to where we're maybe not quite so polarized, where we all can get along, chat, and figure out what's right for the state of Maine, furthermore, what's right for the country. But it's not gonna be done on the far right, and it's not gonna be done on the far left. It's gonna be done in the middle, and we have to get there. I've negotiated for my union for the last 25 years. We always kind of walk away with a little bit of a bitter taste in our mouth. We didn't get everything we wanted, they didn't get everything they wanted, but everybody got a little something, and we're all fairly happy when it was all said and done. That's what I'm hoping for in the state. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All righty, it is time for closing statements, and we are going to start with Representative Krause.
Thank you, Maya. And I would just start by saying thank you to all of you for sitting with us tonight and listening. I think it's a fantastic camaraderie that we can all share where we're coming from. I really believe that state government, as many of us have shared today, is in desperate need of stability and steadiness and voices and ears that will listen to the needs of our constituents. And it's clear that we have some big hurdles to tackle, and I don't think any one person can sit up on stage and say that they have all of the answers. But what I do know is that in the 4 years I've served, it's been really important to me to listen, because I'm not an expert. I'm just a mom and a social worker who cares very deeply about my community. I know every day when I drive up through Ulna on my way to Augusta, I am incredibly honored and privileged to be able to serve this community. And I know that I don't do it perfectly. And And I know now, 4 years in, that good politics means that no one's ever really fully happy, because to find the compromise, to find that place in the middle, means that we haven't made it all the way. And those small steps of progress with bumps along the way and imperfect policies and struggling to find the right way is part of state government. And I listen, I hear, I have strong values that motivate my work. As a mom, as a social worker, I am very driven, but as much as I'm driven to push policy forward, I am also driven to stand back and to listen and to hear what the needs of our community are. And whether or not I'm reelected, it's been a huge honor to have these 4 years. And whatever the future may bring, I think that District 46 is best served by a legislator who listens and who shows up with their whole heart. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, you're up next.
I would like to say, if I make it to the legislature, we really need to work on bringing Maine back to the way life should be. Because right now, we're all knocking doors and we're all hearing that people are like in panic mode in some cases. Can we afford to live here anymore? I would serve to help anybody that needs help. And I truly believe we need to work at the legislature to get along. If we don't, we're not going to accomplish anything. And we're going to be back to the same problems over and over and over again. So I'm willing to serve. I'm asking humbly for your vote. And if anything, don't forget to get out and vote, no matter who you vote for. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Harden.
Again, this has been an education for me. 5 months, 6 months ago, whatever it was, I decided to run. I had no idea what the roller coaster ride I was stepping onto was about. It's been educational, entertaining, terrifying at times. But I do it because I love the people of Maine. I love this state. I have, at my core, my entire life. And I think we're going the wrong way. And I'd just like to get us back, as Mary says, to the way we should be. I don't think anybody up here, and I mean that sincerely, that I don't think anybody's got the poor intentions here. Everybody's got the right intentions. Everybody's trying to do what's right by them. I think we have sometimes different goals, and maybe we'll find middle ground someplace and make it work for everybody. I do want to work with everybody up there. That's the goal. And I hope I earn your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, Senator Rennie, please close the forum.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having this forum. Thank you for coming to this forum. This is one of the strangest jobs I've ever had. It's so interesting. I've learned so many different things about different topics, from learning a heck of a lot more about pogies to learning about cryptocurrency, banking, I don't know. That you have to really enjoy learning to do this job, and I really do. I'm so thankful I managed to get up there. I was very hopeful my school counseling skills would translate well, and I'm so happy to report that they did. It's interesting. You have to have a very strong work ethic, and you also have to be able to understand people, successfully communicate, work interpersonally with everyone, right? I navigate, complex webs of relationships. I use a lot of my middle school skills there, but it works. It works. We get things done. I'm so happy to have passed multiple bills my first year and then more my second. And sometimes it's the big fancy funding rural affordable housing programs, but sometimes it's just making sure that a Elver fisherman, somebody who fishes for Elvers, you're with me, if they get injured partway through their season, which can be a huge part of their income for the year, that they can keep their quota or transfer it to somebody else if they need to, so they can still get by. I love this job. I'm doing a good job. I'm working hard, and I'm gonna keep working hard. I look forward to serving you more, because this is a public service. I'm a real sucker for public service. So thank you for allowing me to be here, and and continue.
Thank you. Again, I would like to thank the candidates for their participation and thoughtful responses. To all of you for coming out and watching on the live stream, GST for hosting us, and also to Playwrights for this help us present this series of forums. As I said before, this is our fifth and final forum of the election cycle. If you missed any of this forum, as well as the four previous, are available to watch on the Lincoln County News Facebook page and YouTube channel. Thank you all, and have a safe trip home.
Thank you also. I hope these next few weeks go well.